today. Here we go. Good evening and welcome to IQ session number 74.
Do you know I forget that every week we're up to? I'm glad
surprised.
that you don't.
No, I've always got Erin as my little guide, which is like my teleprompter.
Very cool. I like it.
Anyway, tonight is all about the macros. Now, macros is probably a term that you've heard thrown around in the fitness world, the health world. And we're here to, I guess, first of all, debunk a few myths, educate you on what you actually need to know, and try to simplify it all as well. So when it comes to macronutrients, first of all, let's explain what macronutrients are first. All right. Do you want to take it away, Matt Dean?
Oh, I'd love to. I think that the easiest way to describe macros is it's the way that food is made up of. So we have calories, which we all know, and this whole challenge is about understanding your calories, which is your big magic number. Well, those calories are made up of macronutrients. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. So there's only in your body, you have fats, you have carbohydrates, you have protein, and you can transfer alcohol. Those are the 4 macronutrients.
I just want to, clarify what Matt just said. You don't have them in your body. It's what your body uses as fuel. So macronutrients
Correct.
are the fuel sources that our body takes in, and all of our food that we take in fits into one or a couple of those 4 macronutrients. So for example, something like a steak is mainly protein, but it also has fat as well. So there's like a primary and can often have a secondary macronutrient with it.
Yep.
I like to consider, to explain macronutrients as kind of like how the body is made up of bone, muscle, organs, and other stuff. That's kind of what macronutrients are for food. Without the bones, the organs, the muscles, and the other stuff, we wouldn't be human. Exactly like food is broken up into those 4 macronutrients. Now, Matt mentioned alcohol. Doesn't mean that you can just drink alcohol. Alcohol is actually considered a toxin in the body, but it can be used as a fuel source.
Yeah, and we'll go into that later on. So I'm not going to dive into that really. But what you need to realize at the forefront before we get right into the macro stuff is that your calories, your big magic number, is your primary focus. Before, more than anything else, don't get bogged down on the detail of macros, because as simple as it actually is, it can get overcomplicated because there's numbers attached to that. Your big number is the easiest way to do it. As long as you hit that magical number every day, every week, and you're doing that all the time consistently, you'll be rewarded for doing that without even focusing on macros. Macros is just like that next level up understanding, which we're going to talk about today.
And that's why we only introduce it now, which we're week 5 in the challenge. So we've given you the first half of the challenge to really get the calories dialed, because without the calories dialing in, you can't then capitalize on macronutrients.
Information overload.
Yeah, information overload. And again, what Matt said is calories are your first and foremost. They're the major priority. And then macros come second. And the macros is what you can use to help you fine tune your energy, your appearance, and kind of help give you a roadmap and a bit more of a clearer understanding as to why you're getting the results and the feelings and stuff that you're getting from the food that you're eating.
Yeah, brilliant. And it's all about balance, isn't it? Really, it comes down to that, really. And with when you're talking macros, you're trying to get the perfect blend of balance, not a lopsided, one-sided approach to something. Because if you do go heavily fat only, it becomes really hard to do that, because so much of the world is made up of carbohydrates, which means that anytime that you were to eat a carbohydrate, it would start to pull you out of that zone of just eating fat. So we're trying to find balance so that you can enjoy life. You don't have to go without. And if you go to a party and someone's got chips on the table, you can eat the chips and you don't feel bad for doing it, because it's just the balance wheel. And that's what we're trying to look at.
Yeah.
Easy.
Cool. So we've got the 4 macronutrients. Let's go into that first. There was something that I just wanted to say on that real quick, and it's totally gone out of my head.
Cool.
All right, let's go into carbohydrates first.
All right, this one here is the one that gets the biggest, baddest rap of all of them.
Yeah.
It is regarded as the devil. It's regarded as you cannot lose weight if you have any form of carbohydrate in your body. And it is, our industry has made it like taboo to even touch a carbohydrate.
And to the people that say that about carbohydrates, I give them a big double middle fingers up. Because carbohydrates do not deserve the bad rap. They're actually your friend. And most people don't understand either is that carbohydrates aren't just your breads, your pastas, your rices, your potatoes. Carbohydrates are fruit and vegetables. Now, if you were to think about it truthfully, honestly, you would know that, and you would be able to answer that fruit and vegetable is a very, very vital key to a healthy, balanced living diet.
We've known that for years and years and years and years and years. That's the whole point of it. It's there. It gives you so much energy. It's clean energy. It's nice. It processes fast. It allows your bowels to move better when you have lots of good balance of your fruit and veggies. And so to say carbohydrates are bad, which our industry has done for some God known reason, what they are referring to is the packaged food carbohydrates. They are referring to that as bad. But what they forgot to tell you was that the fruit and vegetables are perfectly fine. They are a carbohydrate. Yep. Don't bracket them together because they haven't bracketed them together because they're talking about a processed carbohydrate versus a natural carbohydrate. What they needed to say was packaged food touched by man is less food that you should be touching versus the veggies and fruit and stuff. Go nuts on it kind of thing. Because the reality is that carbohydrate is energy. It's the number one preferred source. It's the only energy macronutrient that actually the brain can't function without. If you cannot give it carbohydrate, you'll actually be a space cadet. And I've done a bodybuilding competition one time, and it was just because I used to mock bodybuilders about their approach to things. And I realized that I can't mock something unless I go and try it and go through the whole process. So I applied the disciplines that needed to do it. I took the regime on, I did all the food, I starved myself. I did all those things that they do, the aggressive approach to everything. And when you lead into the last few weeks, you really strip down everything and you try and starve yourself of all the nutrition you possibly can. So you deplete all your carbohydrates. I think I was on like 600 calories a day, maybe even less. It wasn't much. I was just trying to get every bit of fat out of my body I possibly could. So I was barely eating. But what happened in that process was 2 weeks leading in, we went to the supermarket and we were looking for eggs. And I didn't even know I was in this spacey zone. I just assumed I was still normal, nothing different. Sheridan's on the outside, eating every carbohydrate, perfectly fine, brain functioning really well. And she looks over at me and I'm looking up at the sign just in like La La Land. Sheridan's been down, grabbed the eggs. She's gone and found some other bits and pieces, comes back, sees me and she says, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Looking for the eggs." And she goes, "I've got them." I'd stood there for a couple of minutes looking at the sign, which says eggs, and I couldn't comprehend, go down the aisle and get it. My brain was lacking because I was trying to eat proteins to repair the muscle and all that sort of stuff there. But I was lacking so much carbohydrate in my body that I couldn't function without it. And that's the number one reason why carbs are not bad, because your brain needs it to function. And it's the number one source of energy that gives you natural energy. It's the same reason when someone's diabetic, that you give them a sugary soft drink or something very high sugar, which is carbohydrates, because it naturally swings their energy the opposite way. It gives them natural energy fast. That's what the carbohydrate does to you. So the challenge we're talking about when people say carbohydrates are bad is because they have this ability to turn into fat. And this is true. They do have the ability to turn into fat.
Now you need to listen closely to this, because if you don't listen to this fully, you'll avoid carbs, but you need to listen to this fully.
Okay, cool. So what that means is, yes, if you have an influx of too much carbohydrates.
We're talking an abundance, like 10 times more than your daily allowance in carbohydrates.
Think overeating more than you've ever done before, double it, like almost. It's so hard to do this process. However, it has the ability to turn into fat. So what someone in our industry, don't know who this person was, but they need a little slap around the ears because they've misconstrued the information. But what they've done is they've said that because it can do that, carbohydrates are bad. Because it can turn carbs into fat in your body and change the molecules and actually pack it into fat. It's bad. Carbs should not be touched. So they came into this whole thing of do not touch them because they can turn into fat. But there was a study done, and I can't remember off the top of my head what it was, where it was and all this sort of stuff. But it was, they basically gave someone pure carbohydrates, glucose, straight into the bloodstream. So they fed it into this person, 3 liters. Now your body can hold 450 grams-ish around that time of carbohydrates. So that what this one person has done, they've had an influx of way more than that. What's that work out to be? 6 times as much as what they can have at any one time. And what happened was, in that process of all that carbohydrate, pure carbohydrate, no other source in their body, just carbs, only 30 grams of it turned to fat. 30 grams of all that carbohydrate. So it's not possible for you to do it unless you consistently overeat ridiculous amounts of food. And then you could change those molecules into fat, because the reality is that for it to have to change a molecule that's a carbohydrate and change it into a fat molecule and do that process, it takes energy. So it actually burns that carbohydrate that's in there, tries to restructure it, and then it can form it. That's why in 3 liters, only 30 grams turned to fat. That was it. So carbs, although they can turn to fat, aren't bad for you. An influx of any food is bad for you. If your calorie, your magic number we said at the start, if you blow that out every time, you're going to have a consequence of doing that. That's why we say if you hit your magic number, first and foremost, everything else is irrelevant as long as that number's hit, regardless of the macros and how they make it up. This is just fine tuning it to make sure you have balance and you're not lopsided in one area and not the other.
Because if you are lopsided in one area, your energy might be lacking. Therefore, like, you might need to increase your carbohydrates, or maybe you need to focus on reducing your fat, etc. So carbohydrates, to give you like the techie speak on carbs, 1 gram of carbohydrates is 4.5 calories. So if for every 1 gram of carb, you get 4.5 calories. And this is to show you how our food is broken down. It is our primary source of energy. So if you're going for the keto lifestyle, which is a full fat diet, the moment you introduce a carbohydrate, your body prefers the carbohydrate. So it will go and burn that first. It will bank the fat and it'll go to that second. So just so you know that we are not fans of keto diet, because it's too fast swinging one way. It means that you can't live like a Western life.
If you have a beer, it's carbohydrate. It's got carbs in it too. So all of a sudden you've come off the keto. So there's no lifestyle that says that this is the only way to go for the rest of your life. That's why we don't really love it. Does it work if you're all on board and do it? Of course it does.
Any diet will, because in reality, it comes down to what are the calories that you're consuming. But what we try to educate all of our members and stuff on is that whatever you do something that you can stick to for the rest of your life. Otherwise, it's just a fad diet, because that's why we teach you how to do the calories on a higher calorie amount that you could actually stick to for the rest of your life. Of course, you would lose weight if we told you to eat 900 calories each day. Would it be enjoyable? Probably not. Would it be sustainable? Definitely not. And we're trying to show you how you get a sustainable diet and healthy lifestyle for the rest of your life. And part of that comes from having a healthy, balanced diet, because carbohydrates are the preferred fuel source. They also carry other benefits and nutrients that you actually need to function as a healthy, balanced human. They carry things like your fiber. Vegetables come with phytochemicals and antioxidants and all these other things that you're not going to find in fat-only foods. Cool. So carbohydrates are your friend. 1 gram is 4.5 calories. It's a primary source of energy. They can turn to fat only if you have an extreme amount, and we're talking extreme. Your body can store 450 grams of carbs at any one time. It actually stores them in your muscles. So that's, again, the energy. And that's why we talk about it storing in your body like that. And they are essential because they carry essential vitamins and nutrients as well. So please never shall I hear you ever again say I'm cutting carbs. My first response when someone says they're cutting carbs is, what, you're not going to eat any fruit or vegetables? And they're like, no, I'm cutting carbs. I'm like, yes, fruit and vegetables are carbs. And they are your friends. Potatoes are good for you, full of vitamin C. Yeah.
If you like bread, you can have bread too. It literally does not matter, because a carb is a carb. And that's the other thing you need to be clear of too. When these macronutrients go into your body, the body doesn't go, oh, this person's having bread. It says, no, it's having a carbohydrate. Oh, this carbohydrate has some fat in it. It doesn't know Big Macs. It doesn't know Coca-Cola. It only knows carbs, fats, proteins, and alcohol. That's it. That's its only understanding.
So if I ate an apple and I ate a Mars bar, my body would recognize it as carbohydrates, because they're both carbohydrates. However, the difference between the apple and the Mars bar is if I have the same amount of calories going in, the only other difference will be that the apple carries other essential vitamins and nutrients like antioxidants, vitamins, fiber, all of this stuff. These are kind of what someone might refer to as like empty calories, because it's literally just instant energy that fizzes out pretty quick.
And if you eat lots of fruit and vegetables, and you'll notice from a carbohydrate point of view, it's a large amount of food. So it can be quite daunting to think, I've got to eat all that food, when I could just have a Mars bar and have the same equivalent of that and whack it down really quickly because it's small. But this is how people get caught out. And this is how people do overeat and do go down that road of not understanding how much they should actually be eating. So we're just trying to find a large amount of balance, which is what the macros are all about. So that's carbohydrates in its simplest form. They're really good for you. Don't be shy of them. The bracketing of packaged foods is what is being bagged out here in our industry.
Cool. The next macronutrient we want to discuss is protein.
Damn gains.
So protein foods are things like your dairies, your meats, your nuts, all those eggs, and there's heaps of other things, but they're kind of like a general snapshot of what proteins are, what kind of foods proteins are. Protein is responsible for the repairing of your hair, skin, nails, and muscles.
This is a really good one to pick up on too, because if you're currently going through restricted calories, and a good instance might be that you've noticed that your hair is it's thinning out a little bit, maybe the nails are a bit brittle and all this sort of stuff there. It can just be something as simple as your macros. When you look at it, you're just not getting enough protein into your body. And Sheridan, when we first really dived into all this sort of stuff, she would have a lot of trouble not getting the protein levels up high enough when she started to look at it, because at the time she was vegan. And when you do it, when you're vegan, it's a lot harder because you've got to try and find these protein sources from things that aren't heavily protein rich, like meats and dairy and stuff like that. So that's a good one to, obviously, if you notice that things are a bit brittle and you're not quite right, the skin's not quite clear like it normally is, it can sometimes just be as simple as adding some protein, a bit more protein into your diet, and things shift and start to change and you start to repair and be a bit better.
A fascinating thing about protein is that the big jacked up dudes at the gym, they will tell you that they got big from protein and the protein powder that they take. This, however, is incorrect. It's the steroids that they're taking that has jacked them up. Protein, your body can only take so much. When it's hit its quota of protein that you've consumed, the rest of it goes straight out the toilet.
You just take a big dump and it's done.
So excess protein, you literally just poo out.
That's it.
You can't OD on protein because your body will only take so much. 1 gram of protein is also 4.5 calories, just like the carbohydrates. So excess protein honestly does not make you bigger. You literally just poo it out, and it's probably an expensive poo. And because
something to think about. Sorry to cut you off there, Sharon, but something to think about too with the protein. And I'll go back to the people because in the fitness industry, the idea and it really came through big through the 80s and stuff like that was you go to the gym, you do a workout, you have your protein shake afterwards, you add your milk, you do all this sort of stuff there. Now, remember, from a caloric point of view, the protein shake is actually only milk solids. If you look at the back of it and you grab some milk solids from the supermarket and you grab the big jacked up dude bottle that has muscle going on the front, and you look at the ingredients on the back of each, they're exactly the same. No difference. The only difference between the two actually is that the big jacked up dude who charges you $70 to $100 for the same bottle as what's in this packaged stuff at the supermarket for $20 is flavoring. They've added sugars to make it sweeter, so it tastes better. So it can be strawberry, vanilla, all that sort of stuff there. So the challenge with it is they've added carbohydrates to it to change it. So your protein source has now got carbohydrates in it, which makes them very high calorie foods. So the idea is that the protein shake is actually more like a milkshake is all you're really having. And so you've got milk solid, which most people add milk to it, and then they add maybe something else. You're honestly better off cracking an egg, chucking some fruit in, and add some water to it and make a smoothie, and you'd get more protein from that than you would from the milk solids.
In your nutrition guide, you will see that there's protein powder free protein shakes. If protein is something that you are lacking and struggling to get in, honestly, you'll be surprised at how little protein you actually need, especially if you're a meat eater. You'll be getting, I'm sure you'll be getting plenty of protein in there, but just something to look at. We never recommend a protein shake or protein powder And the only time that you would consider using one is if you're really deficient, like I was when I was vegan. I really struggled to get it in because I couldn't eat tofu. I couldn't eat those kind of things, couldn't eat eggs. So that was my challenge. But always, if you can get a natural source that hasn't been touched by man, that is always the best source of any type of nutrient, whether it's protein or whether it's vitamins or whatever it might be. We always want to encourage people to eat things that have been touched by man the least. So if I go and pick an apple off the tree, that's barely been touched by man because it's straight from the tree. However, if I eat some sour straps, you can't pick a sour strap off a tree, so they're heavily altered by man. And so we always want to encourage you to have as natural in its natural state as much as possible. And therefore, protein powders would only be necessary if you honestly struggle to get them from the natural source, like things like eggs and meat and stuff like that. You can also get protein from your leafy green vegetables and things like that too. So you can really stock it up. It
takes some research with that stuff to find out exactly how much protein is in each thing. Back to what the misconception is about with protein powders again too, is that generally people promote them. This is what they're taking. This is how they get bigged and jacked and all that sort of stuff. And like Sharon said at the start, sometimes it's quite often they're just on steroids. And we all know that the number one side effect of the steroid is that it's memory loss. They forget they even took steroids. They don't tell you that part. They just say that I'm just on this protein stuff, which we know it can't be because you just pull it out the back. So simply put, they're doing something different that makes them bigger. However, what they do possess that quite often the uninformed do not possess is discipline. They're extremely disciplined people. They'll take their steroids. They'll make sure they don't miss their protein shake. They'll do their Instagram check-ins. They're super structured, stupid, religiously disciplined, unlike the people that tend to follow them and they don't have that same discipline. So they don't have the results, but they bank on their products. Now, they get either paid because it is their product and that's why they promote it, or they get paid because they've been endorsed to promote their product. So they're incentivized by not actually the protein powder, they're incentivized by the check that comes with the powder. And so that unfortunately is misleading because it's not the reason that they're big and bulky or muscly and lean or super fit. It's because they're super disciplined in what they do. And now they're getting paid to promote a product. So this is where that industry of the protein powders is really blurry. Okay. So don't buy into the whole pictures that are on the front of those bottles because it doesn't do anything for you.
Protein is a macronutrient. Yes, it is an energy source. However, it is like the least preferred by your body. So if you're looking at your workout and your nutrition and when you're going to eat certain things, you would not have protein before your workout because it's not going to give you the energy that you need. If you're looking for something before a workout, always go to your carbohydrates. You could do something as simple as a banana, that's straight carbs. You could do toast, whatever it might be. Protein you would consume after a workout. Now, not saying that you do your workout, you have to have your protein. It's not like that. It's just if you want to look into the structure of it, you would be better off having the protein afterwards because it is for the repairing and it doesn't give you the energy like carbohydrates or even fat does. Perfect. Cool. All right, that's protein. Next one, Fat Town, baby. We're going to Fat Town. Right. Let's give you the basics first. 1 gram of fat is 9 calories. I just want to reiterate that carbohydrates and protein, they were 4.5 calories. 1 gram of fat is 9 calories. So anything that's higher in fat is going to be a lot higher in calories. Or you just have to have a very small amount compared to a large amount of carbohydrates. Fat stores as fat. If you have too many calories going in and you have a large percentage of your intake as fat, it will literally just store as fat. So if you're a little overweight, you probably consumed too much fat, not necessarily too many carbohydrates, too much fat, because again, our body will use carbohydrates as its first preferred fuel source, and then once the carbohydrates are all used up, then it will turn to fat, but only once all the carbs are used up. So if you're having too much fat, it will literally just store as fat. Now, it's very easy for the body to store fat. And there is an unlimited amount of fat cells that your body can have.
Billions and billions.
Billions of fat stores. And it has the ability to keep multiplying. That's why if you see people that are like
extremely overweight,
extremely obese, it's because their body can just store fat and store fat and store more fat and store more fat.
And everything in this day and age, if you think about the Uber Eats life, it's typically stuff that's convenient and fast food based. So it is cooked in fat, it's ladled in fat. I can tell you right now, when the chefs are cooking it, they're not going, oh, I better make sure that I only hit the 1 gram of fat quotient for these people. They're just chucking fat in to make flavor happen, and they're doing it so it doesn't burn their pans. They don't care about the process, your grams and your calories. They got zero attention to that detail. What they are is the presentation, and their food tastes good, which they lather it in fat, which is the challenge with it, is because your body does have a requirement and a measurement that it needs to pay attention to. So when we start doing the Uber Eats live, the fat content in most of those foods, not all, but most of those foods is high. And it's convenient. So we generally overeat. It comes with large portions of protein, large portions of fat, large portions of carbohydrate. So it seems like it's balanced, but it's huge calories in one tiny little meal.
For example, if you were to get a Big Mac meal from Macca's, it's like 1,100 calories.
1,100 calories.
And that's going to be a huge
burger,
portion.
chips, and a drink.
That's going to be a huge portion of most of your daily intake.
1,100.
Now, the good old story when it comes to fat is, oh, it's okay, I'm having good fats versus bad fats. Sorry, honey, fat is fat. It's just like the apple and the Mars bar. The good fats just come with extra benefits. However, your body only sees it as fat.
Not avocados.
No, it's like,
oh,
we'll go easy on it today. It's just avo and toast.
Yeah, smashed avo.
No, it's fat. Fat is fat.
It doesn't differentiate.
The only difference is that the avocado, yes, it's fat, but it does have some other beauties that come with it, other essential nutrients and fatty acids and stuff like that, for sure. However, we do need to keep our fat. We still need fat in our body. Our brain needs fat. Our organs and stuff need a level of fat. So we do still need to make sure we have fat coming into our diet as a really good general health, healthy, balanced diet. We do need fat. Now, the good old question is always, do we do the low fat option? Do we do the full fat option, etc.? Do we do the no fat option? Again, I want to remind you that the product that's as close to its natural state is always the best. Sometimes it might mean it has a few extra calories, but it hasn't been touched by man as much. Therefore, it's a lot more wholesome and it'll have a lot more benefits to you. It just might mean that you have to have a little less. So I would always recommend going for the most natural state. But if you prefer something that's, the low fat option, then of course enjoy it, but don't make that be your deciding factor as to what you consume, whether you have low fat milk or full cream milk. It doesn't necessarily matter. You just want to make a decision based on your idea of health and how you want to approach this. But just remember, the minimal touch by man is always better.
Yep. And we always say that as a real simple philosophy, because it's a bit harder now because most people are ordering online, but when you go in the supermarket, just shop around the outside of the supermarket. Don't do the aisles. The aisles are all packaged. Think about that as little mini merchants all down those lanes, people trying to sell you their product. But the people on the outside are the farmers, and they've cultivated their food, and it's sitting there ready for you to have.
They don't need the fancy slogans, but all the mini merchants down the aisles are like, come on, come by me. Yeah. This is why you need us.
Yeah. So if you stay away from the aisles, and I'm not talking, we always say that there's stuff on the ends of the aisles, doesn't mean you can reach them, you can take them. The food around the outside, you're going to get an awesome amount of variety. You get your meats, your dairy products, there's breads and stuff around the outside, the fruit and veg. It's all generally pretty good around the outside as best you possibly can. So if you can treat your shopping to that, you're already making better decisions based on the moment you start aisle shopping, you start getting packages in there, you're having something tampered with, means that you don't quite know what's gone into it to make it what it looks like.
Yeah.
So we try and avoid that as much as we possibly can to create balance.
Foods that are fat, you've got things like avocados, you've got nuts, you've got butters and oils and all of those kind of things. And we do want to keep them to a healthy minimal.
Yeah. And on the nuts, this is the one that probably catches a lot of people out. And avocados. Avocados are high calories, huge. Remember, overall number one responsibility of you guys, calories. That's the one we don't want to bog down all this other detail. Calories every day of the week is my number one priority. Everything else is just great. If we can get a bit of balance, it's awesome. Get some fine tuning and that stuff there. But where people go wrong is they don't quite understand the fattiness in certain things, like something like an avocado or nuts. Now, I like this story because Sheridan's mum loves is it Nobby's nuts?
Nobby's
salted peanuts. And she would have a bag of them just grazing through the day. Nothing, like, it's a bag, but it's not crazy. You wouldn't think it was astronomical. And she would eat these, and then you'd have obviously like a snack during the day if she has lunch, and then dinner. I said to her, I was like, do you know how many calories are in that bag of nuts? And she goes, no. And she would have it grazing over the period of a day. And I told her it's 2,400 calories in one bag of those peanuts. Not to mention, if you have a glass of wine in the evening, if you have a dinner, if you have this, 2,400 calories. Her daily, that's more than that time was more than my daily allowance. And I'm like double the size of her. So all of a sudden,
my mum's like the size of me. We're like child size. So mum's daily allowance should be more so around the 1,500, and she was having 2,400 just in peanuts.
Not to mention coffees, not to mention anything else. She didn't know. And she's like, oh. So, but then she couldn't understand why she was a bit squidgy and why things weren't tight like they should be. I'm moving, I'm doing all this. Well, the reality is if you eat high fatty foods, they store as fat. And the cool analogy is like, think like a hydro slide. You know, like you go to the pools and there's that fast one that goes straight down, and there's the windy ones that go around the side. It takes a long time to get to the bottom. Well, the fat one is the straight one that goes straight from top to bottom. It's like, boom, gets there quick. The carbohydrate one takes time. It takes effort. You got to go around the roundabout sort of thing. And then you get to where it needs to get to. So the reality is if it's high fatty foods and you're not paying attention to it, it will catch you out, because a little little handful of nuts is actually high calories. It's not as low as you think.
You got to think about it. It's like 10 nuts, 10 little nuts usually is like 100 calories. That's not many. So a great way to do a quick check on how many nuts you should have. Can you close your fist? Whatever you can fit in a closed fist is a decent amount of nuts for you.
Not the second, not two.
Not cupped hands.
Yeah, not like spreading fingers. It's literally that.
Now another myth that we really want to bust is fat. Muscle weighs more than fat.
Bow, bow.
Muscle, 2 kilograms of fat and 2 kilograms of muscle weigh 2 kilograms. It's exactly the same.
Whoa.
The difference being 2 kilograms of fat is like this size.
Yeah.
2 kilograms of muscle is
lean,
like this size.
Sexy.
So this is another reason why you should be chucking out your bloody scales, because it is not a good representation of what your health, where your health is at. You have no idea how much I weigh. And it is honestly of no benefit for you to know how much I weigh. The only reason why I would need to know how much I weigh every now and then is to make sure my calories are correct. But I can't tell you you're healthy or not healthy by how much you weigh. There's no, please throw out the BMI scale. That is a completely useless tool that should never be referred to. It's actually a design of the Asian race. So Matt, on the BMI scale, Matt is obese.
I do like my food.
He's far from obese. Please know that. So when it comes to jumping on the scales, you're like, oh, it's okay. Muscle weighs more than fat. That's why I'm heavier. Please just chuck out the scales. And the only thing that matters is that your measurements are what counts.
Can I jump in on the BMI scale too?
Please.
Where a BMI scale is actually important and to pay attention is children. It's relevant to them because they're short, they're pint size, and it's a relevant scale of metrics. Now, if the children read more than a 30 BMI, it's an express for concern that something needs to change. Their diet needs to change and their activity needs to change. And remember, kids can move every day. They only don't move every day if they're not given the opportunity to move every day. It doesn't mean they're naturally going to go, I need to move. It means that they may be told to go and move. So moving every day is doing their part. But if their BMI reads more than 30 on a BMI scale, that is expression for concern. You need the children to start moving more, and you need to start monitoring their food.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean make a big complex, make it really awkward about it. It just means pay attention and go, okay, cool. Their BMI is at 30 plus, and I need to make sure I can get that down without making them have a complex about food. I'm going to just reduce their portions, and I'm going to start like that. I'm going to make them eat a little bit less without them knowing, and then allow them to do the work and go and exercise and do that stuff. Because our children, unfortunately, if you have a high BMI at a young age and you compound that, and everything you do is rewarded for, consistency is always rewarded, regardless if it's good or bad, you're rewarded with it. And so if you're young and you're consistently eating a lot, by the time they're an adult, when the BMI chart is irrelevant anymore, then we have a challenge. You know, you have an obese child, and this is where it gets tricky.
Turns into an obese adult.
And then, an obese child, then an obese adult, and then the lifestyle changes. Now, we got asked by we said one time that a child was fat, and the person got a little bit offended by it. You can't say that the child's fat. And I was like, well, we actually can, because our industry is governed by health, right? We are health and fitness professionals, is what we do. Now, the reason our concern when a child is fat, and you can't hide from it, and adults get fat, it's because food's gone in and it's created too much fat. Now, the reason we get concerned by it is because the fat sits around the organs. The organs are what keep you alive. So if they're suffocating because of the fat, then what you're doing is an injustice to your child, because you're trying not to offend their feelings. They need to know that being fat places pressure on your organs. Placing pressure on your organs puts you at risk of coronary heart disease, cancers, all those things, lung deficiencies, all these things that do not need to be in your body ever. And it can be reduced by making your lifestyle healthier and reducing the fat content inside your body without getting a hang up on it. We don't need food like starvation or all that sort of stuff. What we need is a balance and an understanding so that kids can enjoy their food and move a lot and get balanced so that they're not obese when they leave school.
So the statement that you can be healthy at any size isn't actually true. And we want to debunk that too, because if you do have too much fat in your body, it's literally like 10 people playing stacks on top of me. I'm going to find it pretty hard to breathe. No, I'm not saying that I couldn't breathe, but it's going to be pretty challenging. You're just placing your organs under so much extra stress that
it doesn't need to be there.
Doesn't need to happen. So you don't have to be like 15% body fat and shredded and lean and, you know, all that kind of thing, but there is too much fat on a body. And we just don't want you to get to that, because the risks when you get to that stage, they're just too high. And the number one killer in our world is not COVID, it's coronary heart disease. And that's from coming from not a bad diet, but just eating too much, not moving enough, and having too much fat on your body. So it's really, really important that we strive to be healthier, leaner, balanced, fitter, stronger.
Because all that stuff can be reduced. That's the beautiful part about exercise and health and nutrition, is when you do have a balance and you haven't overcomplicated and you realize it is actually quite simple, you can reduce most of the number one killers of the world can be reduced with a healthy immune system and a healthy body, just through moving every day. It doesn't have to be for long periods of time, and eating a balanced diet and sticking to that magical number. You will have a healthier world that we live in. Unfortunately, Uber Eats has crept in, and now COVID's crept in. You're not allowed to leave, you're not allowed to go outside, and we're sitting more and we're eating more and we're feeling sorry for ourselves.
Yeah. Cool. So where does macros go from here? So we've kind of given you a snapshot of what macros are. Now, how do you implement it into your diet? Again, we need to stress that calories are number one. If you're blowing out your calories, the macros are irrelevant. You've got to hit your calories first. Now, the only reason you may need to tweak your macronutrient wheel, we call it a wheel because you look at it more so as a percentage, is if your energy may not be fully there where you need it to be, or maybe you're a little bit squidgy around the tummy and all this kind of thing. So a really great, there's probably 3 or 4 different percentage splits that that are pretty standard, would you say, for what people should strive to achieve with their macronutrients. Now, again, this is only a rough guideline and each person is different. For me personally, I need a higher carbohydrate intake, lower fat, and medium protein. Whereas someone else might actually function better on higher fat, not necessarily their biggest percentage being fat. But you're going to have to tweak it slightly to whatever works best for you. But if you say, for example, for me, I aim for 50% of my diet to be carbohydrates, 30% to be protein, 20% to be fat. Now, do I hit those ratios every day? Hell no. I just want to be in the vicinity of that, because I know for me, that's how my body functions best, for the level of activity that I do, because I need to have the energy, et cetera, the amount of protein that I'm consuming to make sure I'm looking after my muscles and my body, etc. Matt, on the other hand, would go for a little bit of a different swing.
Yeah, mine would be more of a 40% carbs. I do probably the 40% protein and then the fats, but the fats take care of the protein, rolls into the fats. And that's kind of how I look at it. I'm pretty a bit more balanced on the carbs protein balance, and then try and minimize the fat. But again, the one that blows out the most, and it's really easy to do, is the fat content, because the proteins that I generally like to eat, if I'm not eating like lean proteins, if I'm having steaks and things like that, they come with an element of fat. So, and then if you cook them in fat, you've got to accommodate for that fat. So it's really easy to blow that one out, which is why I like to try and keep it lean, to allow that buffer to sort of push it out to get to about 30%, and it shifts everything around.
So when you're trying to work out your daily intake and how you're going to adjust macronutrients and stuff, just like Matt said, we recommend starting off with your protein. Protein's probably the hardest one to get in there. Fat always accompanies the protein, and then carbs are just easy to add in at a later stage. So what we would recommend doing is, if on your MyFitnessPal, you can actually look at a wheel. I'm going to share, I want to share this so you can actually see what I'm talking about. All right. You can see a wheel here. This is set up with how I approach my macronutrients. So 50% is the blue, that's the carbohydrates. 20% is the fat, and that's in the red. And my protein is 30%, and that's the one in the green. Now, what I would suggest you do is look at your wheel on MyFitnessPal by tapping your, I'll put up a how-to on how to find that in afterwards. And you want to look at what you're currently doing. Rather than starting from scratch, put in your food that you would normally eat and then tweak it slightly from there. If you're having 2 tablespoons of Greek yogurt with your muesli of a morning, maybe try, would it affect much if you dropped it back to 1 tablespoon, et cetera, et cetera. But you always want to start off with what you're currently eating and then tweak it from there. Tweaking your protein first tends to be a lot more of a simpler approach, because the fat always accompanies it, and the carbs are really quite easy to add in.
And the cool part is, we're creatures of habit. We typically will eat the same stuff relatively within a spectrum, not too crazy. So once you actually do get your balance and your thing right, it's pretty easy to stick to that lane, and only sort of gets tampered with if you go out for a dinner or something that's a bit out of the blue. But while we're at home and you're in control, you can gauge that thing pretty easy. But if you've been already using the MyFitnessPal, go have a look at previous days and just look at the wheel at the bottom. You'll see there's a tab. Sheridan will post it in a minute. And just look at what you've been doing. Just see, is there balance, or is it swinging one way more than the other? And is it swinging the way that you want it to go? So if it's swinging lots of carbohydrates and it's minimal fats, minimal proteins, maybe you go, I want to increase my protein. Don't overcomplicate it. The big number is always the number one thing we're looking for. And the last thing we haven't talked about, which I'll make this really fast, is alcohol. Alcohol is a macronutrient in the body, and it is counted for. It is counted when it goes in. It's 1 gram of alcohol is 7 calories. Okay, pretty simple. So you've got the carbs and protein the same at 4.5 calories. You got your fats at 9 calories per gram, and then alcohol is 7. Now, when the alcohol goes into your body, it's a toxin. It's a foreign toxin. It's why you have energy. It's why you feel good when you have it, because it's basically your body's vibrating it out by charging your body to get rid of it. It wants to burn it off. So that spends its time doing the burning off of the alcohol, and not the processing of all the food that's gone in. So instead of, think of it like it puts the food processing and digestion and stuff to a halt while it gets rid of the alcohol. Now, the alcohol generally comes with some form of carbohydrate in it. So you got the carbs going in, again, not really being processed because the alcohol takes priority. You keep having another drink, you keep having another drink. Before you know it, you've only really been drinking, and your energy's been running on the alcohol. Once the alcohol burns off, the next day you're usually rather tired, and we call it a hangover, obviously. that fatigue that you feel afterwards is because your body's so tired from trying to oxidize off all the alcohol. And now it's got to get to town on all the food that you've been eating the day before, or you had the souvlaki on the way home, whatever it is, when you're getting home late at night. So the reality is that alcohol takes preference over everything else in the scheme. Is that body wants it out because it doesn't want it actually in your body, because it is a foreign toxin. Done.
I want to backtrack, sorry, one more thing to when we're looking at our macros on your MyFitnessPal. You can also look at the macros from a grams point of view as well. That's when it gets probably a little overwhelming. Stick first of all to looking at your percentages and then go from there. Now, tonight is a very much an overview and a snapshot of what macronutrients are and how you could possibly implement it into your diet. If you would like to take macros further, that's when I would recommend us doing like a one-to-one session. That's completely free. Of course, there's no charge to that, but I would rather sit down, when I say sit down, on Zoom or something like that, and discuss your goals and where you're currently at so that we can tweak it better for you and because you may think you may not actually need to tweak what you're doing, but it's very much a specific thing, and it's probably too detailed to go into on a Zoom, on a IQ session like this. So if you have got your calories nailed, I will not talk to you about it if you haven't been nailing your calories, but if you have got that nailed and then you would like to look at digesting and diving into macros further, please, let's organize a one-on-one catch up, please. Other than that, that's pretty much macronutrients. But of all of this, what we want you to take home is that calories are still number one. Cool. Does anybody have any questions before we head on off? If you do, please just wave at us and I can unmute you, or you can type them in your little chat box. Otherwise, please feel free to message us later on, or get in touch with us another time. But we're here to help. Hopefully that's giving you a little bit more information on that. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, legends.
We appreciate your time. Appreciate you guys investing into you. And we will see you tomorrow. Mwah!
See you guys. Thank you.